What's up, guys? And today we gonna talk about one of the most important things in networking, which is subnetting. So let's get straight into it. So first off, we have to answer the question, what is subnetting? So when we're talking about subnetting, we're basically taking our big network and we're dividing it into smaller networks. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, there's a few reasons, but the main reason is security. If we have a really big network and everybody's just kind of sharing everything, well then bad actors can potentially get in there and access things they shouldn't be accessing. But if we take that big network and we subnet it or break it up into smaller pieces, well now we can control who has access to what. Another reason could be performance. Maybe we have a really big network and maybe one part of the network is really far away from another part of the network. By subnetting, we can break that up and have smaller networks closer together so they communicate better. And then the last reason would be for administration. It just makes it a lot easier to manage smaller networks instead of one huge massive network. Alright, so now we know why we would want to subnet. Let's talk about what you need to know in order to subnet. So first, there's three things that we're going to need to know. The first thing we're going to need to know is our CIDR notation. Now, if you're not sure what a CIDR notation is, don't worry, I got you. So right here you see this IP address, 192.168. 1.1. Well, that's an IPv4 address. And in order to have an IPv4 address, it needs to have a subnet mask with it. Now, this subnet mask, instead of me writing it out like this, we can actually convert it into a CIDR notation. Now, what's a CIDR notation? Well, instead of writing out the whole subnet mask, we just write the number of bits that are used for the network. So instead of writing out all that, it's just /24. Now, depending on how many bits you use, you can have different sizes of networks. For instance, if you use 8 bits, that gives you a Class A network. If you use 16 bits, that gives you a Class B network, and if you use 24 bits, that gives you a Class C network. Now, once you get above 24 bits, instead of D and E, we're just going to call it a custom network because it can be any size you want. But you can see on this chart right here, the bigger the network, the more addresses you can have within that network. But also notice the amount of hosts per network is decreasing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Alright, so the second thing we're going to need to know is how to read a subnet mask. Now, if you already know how to read a subnet mask, feel free to skip ahead to the next lesson. But if you don't know, don't worry, I got you. So right here you see a subnet mask 255, 255, 255, 0. Well, this is a Class C network because we're using 24 bits for the network. So the first thing we gonna do is we gonna take out all the 255s and replace them with a 1, and we left with 255. Then we gonna put a period after each one, and then we gonna convert that to binary. So 255 in binary is 11111111, and so we'll put that over here. So now we have 11111111. The third thing we're going to need to know is our IP address. And the way to find your IP address is go down here to your command prompt and type in IP protocol configuration. And you can see my IP address is 192.168.123. Now, I know there's a lot of numbers to remember here, but don't worry, I got you. So 192.168.123. Well, the first three numbers will stay the same, and then the last number is going to change. Okay, so that's what you need to know. Alright, so now that we have our CIDR notation, our subnet mask, and our IP address, we can actually subnet. So in order to do this, we're going to need some paper and a pencil. So grab those two things. Now what you want to do is draw a table like this. So you're going to have 4 columns. The first column is going to be the network, the next one's going to be the subnet, the next one's going to be the range, and the last one's going to be the usable IP addresses. Okay, so let's fill out the first row. So the network is going to be whatever our original network was. So I said no changes to the first 3 numbers. So we'll leave that alone. Then for the subnet, we're going to add a number between 0 and 255. Now the only rule is that this number cannot be the same as the last number here. So let's go with 10. Okay, then we have to calculate the range. And the way we do that is we take the subnet and we multiply it by 2. So 10 times 2 equals 20. Then we add 1 to that. So 21. So the range is going to be from 0 to 21. And then we have to subtract 2 from that range. So we take 21, subtract 2, which gives us 19. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. So 21 minus 2 is equal to 19. Okay, so now we know that we have 19 usable IP addresses on this subnet. Now you might be wondering, where did those numbers come from? Why do we have to subtract 2? Well, let me explain. So if you look at the previous table, you'll see we have 256 addresses available. Well, you can't have 2 network addresses. You only need 1. Then you have 2 broadcast addresses. So we have to subtract 2 from that total. And then we have to subtract 1 because we're using that first IP address as our router. So 256 minus 2 minus 1 is equal to 253. And then we divide that number by the number of subnets. So 253 divided by 2 is equal to 126.5. Now you always have to round up to the nearest whole number. So we'll go with 127. And that's how we got that range. Okay, so now we can fill out the rest of the table. So we'll start with the next subnet. So the subnet is going to be 10. Now the network is staying the same. So 192.168.1, then the subnet is 10. Then we take that subnet and multiply it by 2 and add 1, which gives us 21. Then we'll take that number and subtract 2, which gives us 19 usable IP addresses. Okay, so now we can continue this process until we get to the last subnet. Now remember, if you need more usable IP addresses, you can always subnet again. So if you need more than 19, you can just keep doing this process. Alright, so now that we have our table filled out, we can actually go in and assign the IP addresses. So we'll start with the network address. So the network address is going to be whatever the first IP address is in that network. So we have 192.168.1.0. Now, in order to get the network address, we just need to change the last octet to a 0. So 192.168.1.0. And then we'll move over to the next IP address, which is the broadcast address. So in order to get the broadcast address, we just have to change the last octet to a 255. So 192.168.1.255. Now, in order to get our usable IP addresses, we just have to start at the third IP address and go all the way up to the 254th IP address. So 192.168.1.3 up to 192.168.1.254. Alright, so now that we have our IP addresses, we can actually configure our devices. So if you're using Windows, go down here to your command prompt and type in IP protocol configuration. And then we take our IP address, and we change the last octet to our new IP address. And we can do that by typing in IPv4 address. Now if you're using Linux, the easiest way to do it is to open up your network manager, and then we go under our Ethernet, and then we click edit, and then we go down here and change our IPv4 address to our new IP address. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. As always, I'm going to put the link to the quiz in the description. So good luck, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.